What is up, guys and gals? Welcome to Tausify. My name is Tausif, and Bassem Youssef is back on Piers Morgan Uncensored. And last time I covered his previous interview, that did tremendously well for my channel. I got a huge response. It was the first video to reach 1,000+ views on my channel, so I'm glad that you guys liked it. Very much appreciate the response. So since Bassem Youssef has returned on Piers Morgan Uncensored, so I've also decided to do a follow-up on his latest interview. This was actually a lot longer. This is like a 2-hour video, a 2-hour long interview. And in this interview, he also talks about the Israel-Palestine issue. So I'm not going to cover the entire interview. I'm not going to react to this entire thing. So I'm just going to basically give you a rundown version. Like, basically, the interview starts off and Piers Morgan actually asks him about how he started his career, his personal life, his career as a surgeon prior to becoming a comedian and a talk show host. And it's all very fascinating. It's a fascinating story behind this amazing Egyptian comedian. So I recommend you watch the full thing. But I'm actually more interested in showing you the Israel-Palestine, the portion of this conversation that surrounds the Israel and Palestine issue, because that's actually what we're all focusing on nowadays. So I'm just going to jump right ahead, and it's probably around this. So I'm going to jump all the way to this 19-minute mark.
The other person sees, and I hope in that interview that we can bridge that gap.
Yes.
Well, before we can I do it? Okay. So this is a gift from me and my wife. This is the olive oil from the West Bank.
Oh.
Whenever I go to Jordan a lot. My wife also ask for the oil from the West Bank.
It's very good.
It is the best oil ever. And the thing is, the olive trees, they survive up to 600 years.
Mm.
And they are passed from one generation to the other. And it is like a family heritage. And the way that you do it, so this is za'atar. Za'atar is basically thyme, and you add to it sesame and a bunch of herbs. And the way that you eat that, you take like a piece of bread. We don't have to do it now, maybe at the end of the interview.
Yeah.
And you basically, you soak it a little bit in the oil, and then you take the za'atar. And I'll demonstrate here.
Okay.
And then here.
Oh, that looks delicious.
I love it. I love Arabic food. So
You're leaving with this oil. It'll be, so
I will
sure,
take that.
it cures that.
well,
Yeah.
thank you. It's very kind of your wife. Thank you. Thank you very much for.
Well, I'm the one who bought it, but it's okay.
Obviously, you started the last interview with, I would argue, savagely dark fever involving your wife.
Mm-hmm.
How you've been trying to kill her, and she was using your kids as human shields and stuff. And I'll be honest
I'm
with
still trying to. But you know what? When I failed, you know what I did? I went out to the house and I just randomly slapped other neighbors.
it's interesting.
By mistake.
Now, this time I'm ready for you, okay? This time I'm ready for the humor.
Oh, you're ready? Okay.
Yeah, but it's interesting because last time I was very taken aback. And I remember thinking, as you were doing this, it was right off the top. I remember feeling very uncomfortable, unusually uncomfortable, and thinking I didn't know how to react to that. I didn't know whether I was supposed to laugh or be silent, or I sort of ended up sort of slightly grimacing, half laugh and listening. And then I realized it was very powerful what you were doing. It was satirical, but it was savagely satirical and extremely effective. And that's why I think the interview did so well. But I'm not going to pretend that I found it easy to listen to it or to react to it, because I didn't.
You know why? Because all I did was just take the talking points that's been in the media, not just for after October 7th, all through the conflict. It's always like, we need to kill it, or you need to kill 5? No, kill 10. You need to kill some? No, kill all. This is what satire does. It take reality, flip it on its head, exaggerate it, and then you can see how sometimes very uncomfortable and even sometimes stupid that sounds. Because I was just reacting to whatever the media is telling me. It was like, oh, what can do? There's no pushback. So suddenly, the person who was proposing the most extreme measures, like, oh, take it, no, that's too much. So that was like a very simple technique. I just took the talking point and just exaggerated.
It was devastatingly effective.
Yeah.
First, before we go any further, how is your wife's family? Because She is our Palestinian.
Yeah.
Are they okay?
No, they're good. They're good. They are safe for now.
Yeah.
In as like that last week, there was no internet. As you have, I saw you tweet at the IDF. It's like, how can they know if
How many views that tweet's at? Nearly 40 million.
Yeah.
Me just saying, how are they going to see this message if you've cut the internet?
Yeah.
Here's where I've got to with this conflict. Better this week, and he did that tweet I did was enormous, as everything is in this thing. And I had a lot of people say, finally, Piers, you get it, right? Finally, you get it. And I wanted to say, listen, I'm trying to reach a place where I get it. It's an incredibly complicated issue for someone who is not Arabic or Jewish to poke their head into. And I've had to cover it as a journalist for a long, long time. I think I said to you before that I was editor of the Daily Mirror in England when we opposed the Iraq War, for example. So, I have taken stands on this thing. On this one, I find I'm going to be completely straight with you. I discussed this with Jordan Peterson this week. And Jordan did a pretty essential in which he said, give them hell, Netanyahu, enough is enough. And he was actually very self-reflective about that in the interview we did this week, where he later issued a 20-minute video, because he said sometimes a one-line tweet can be unnecessarily inflammatory to people. Much better to take time to explain it. Here's where I've got to with this conflict now. I viewed what happened on October the 7th as an absolutely appalling atrocity.
Well, currently, as we're recording this video, 9,000 people in Gaza have been killed. So, don't you find that appalling? So, like, I get that a terrorist attack happened, over 1,000 people died. It's very tragic, very bad. Condemn it. I condemn this. But then, in a response, Israel kills 9,000 people. That is way worse than the terrorist attack. So if we're going by the same standards, then what the Israeli government is doing is 9 times worse just by the numbers than what the terrorist attacks did. If a terrorist attack kills not over 1,000 people, and what you're doing as an act to stop the terrorists, and as a result, if you kill 9 times more people than the actual terrorists, doesn't that make you worse than the terrorists? Like, that's my whole point.
Attack of unimaginable horror. And I absolutely think that Israel has a right to defend itself.
That's not defense. I'm sorry.
Did it en masse.
That is not self-defense.
And I've questioned for the last 3-4 weeks, what is a proportionate response? And I have said repeatedly, I don't know the answer. I want people who have a view to have a view about that. I'll ask you again about where you think we are with this. I also acknowledge that Hamas live amongst civilian people in Gaza. And therefore, if you do what the Israelis are currently doing, which is a ground offensive into Gaza, a lot of civilians are going to get killed. And at what point does that become disproportionate or even illegal? And I don't know.
You know what? I really liked the back and forth with Anna Kasparian on the PBD podcast. If we go to, and I also want to make a separate video on this because I liked her solution. Her solution was to send like a special ops or like an investigator team into Gaza, because they make a case that the Hamas have like underground tunnels where they operate. That's their excuse for bombing civilians. But when they kill these civilians and they demolish these buildings, they're just damaging the surface. But if they're in like underground tunnels, then the bombs on top are not going to destroy these tunnels. So you got to do something about the tunnels. So you actually have to send people in, send fighters, special ops, investigators, and military inside the tunnels and fight the Hamas fighters where they're actually are hiding, right? So if you were really serious about finding Hamas, you would have found them by now.
Answers to those questions. And I have a moral quandary because my instinct is to say that Israel has no choice but to respond to what happened in a very forceful manner. I understand why they want to eliminate Hamas altogether. I understand that if they feel they can, then perhaps we can move to a two-state solution or peace or whatever it may be, although I don't think that Netanyahu will ever be the person to do that. But the moral question for me is, at what point does this become disproportionate? And when you
It has already become disproportionate a long time ago. We're talking 9,000 people, half of them are children, being dead, including a kid who wanted to become a YouTuber and hit 100,000 subscribers. His channel now has 900,000 subscribers, only he is not alive to see it.
Muslims of children being killed in Gaza, it fills me with utter horror. And then people say, well, do you...
Yeah, so it has become disproportionate.
And when you see thousands of children
it has become
killed in Gaza, it fills me with utter horror. And then people say, well, do you condemn it? And I find it very easy to condemn Israel turning off the water, Israel turning off the power. I think it's ridiculous that Israel should have that power over millions of people who are not part of their country. I think it's terrible what's happening in the West Bank with the settlers. I think that the stuff there is completely easy to condemn. But can I hand on heart condemn Israel trying to destroy Hamas after what they did on October the 7th? That is where I'm struggling.
No, you don't have to condemn that, but you do have to condemn the civilian deaths. There's a difference between going after Hamas and going after civilians, which they have deliberately did. And their officials, their politicians, they deliberately say that just a couple days ago, and I'm gonna make another video about it, Benjamin Netanyahu calling the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, Amalekites, referencing to a verse from the Bible where God commands, the Israelites to wipe out the Amalekites, this civilization of people who were like pagan, like a civilization of like pagans and these like pagan worshippers, and God commanded the Israelites, Joshua, to wipe them out. And just a couple days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech where they compared the Palestinians with the Amalekites. You can condemn that, right? You don't have to condemn wanting to take out a terrorist organization, sure, but you have to condemn what they're doing. They're killing civilians.
And to find myself saying I condemn it because I believe that they are right to try and destroy Hamas. Now, what do you feel about my moral quandary?
Well, there's a lot of points, and I think this will kind of like lead the ground rules for that interview. There is the whole thing about like is the right to defend itself, the condemnation. First of all, let's start with condemnation.
Yes.
Well, my opinion.
Yes.
Condemning Hamas or condemning Israel.
Yeah.
Completely useless. Completely useless.
Why?
I condemn Hamas. You condemn Israel. Interviews over. What happened? Nothing. It is just checkpoint. It's like morality checkpoint.
So I've interviewed a lot of pro-Palestinians, for example, some of whom would immediately say, I unreservedly condemn the terror attacks of October the 7th, and then go on to criticize Israel. And I think that's a position I can completely respect.
Yeah.
But I find it much harder to respect a pro-Palestinian guest on my show if they simply resolutely refuse to say that they can condemn the terror attacks.
Yeah.
I find that less worthy of respect.
But you see, this is the problem with the news. We go into the circular motion of the same as one thing that I have noticed, not just in the coverage of these events, the events before and before and before. Every time this starts, people say, we don't know what's happening. It's a very complicated situation. What is happening now? And for me, as a viewer, if a conflict that's been there for 75 years and the media with all this technology has been covering it and we hear the same exact words, we don't know what's happening. It's complicated. It's a very complex. That is a failure.
The media is absolutely dog shit. Not only is it dog shit, it's deliberately dog shit. That it wants to be dumb or pretends to be dumb so that the people don't receive the actual information. They just get stuck in a loop. And obviously that's been their plan for a long time. And this is why I feel like Piers Morgan is a bit different, because he has Bassem Youssef. This is a second interview, and he did interview lots of Palestinian voices, which other news channels kind of just ignore straight up. So we'll see what happens from here, because, yeah, I think this could mean something, because at least Bassem Youssef is able to convey his side of the argument, right?
Apparatus. That is the failure to themselves and for the that is the failure of the media apparatus. That is the failure to themselves and for the audience. Because why every time this happens, it seems like it is happening.
It's happening
from point zero
for the first time. Yeah.
To help understand that, I will get to the October 2nd. I will get to the condemnation. I will get to the self-defense.
But then also condemn the 75-year plus apartheid, right? Why would you just stop condemning? Why did you start from that point? Why would you start your condemnation from that point and not before that? What about what happened in 2014, right? What about what happened in 2021? What about what happened to Shireen Abu Akleh? Where are the condemnations? Where are all the condemnations that, we need to demand more condemnation, more so than these guys who want us to condemn Hamas?
But I think maybe we can we have like all the time in the world, and we can discuss, this interview could be a bookmark, landmark for maybe looking at that conflict in a deeper way that nobody had gone there before. We had the views, we have people waiting.
Yes.
As I said, I'm the least qualified to discuss that, but it's an opportunity to use.
Listen, I'm not massively well qualified myself.
Yeah, both of us. Like, I mean, look at us.
I'm an Irish Catholic.
I mean, look at us here.
What? Since he brings up being Irish, in Ireland, the vast majority of people there, including the politicians, are all pro-Palestine, right? So if anything, he's proving to be a disgrace to the Irish, because the Irish are pro-Palestinian.
Privileged people, one white wannabe, discussing the most complex conflict of our history. But I want to start in a totally different area. I want to start with anti-Semitism.
Yes.
I think it's an important area.
Yes.
I think there is a rise of anti-Semitism in the world, and I think this is very dangerous. And I, as a Muslim who has been through events where there were terrorist attacks somewhere, and that reflects on us. I can completely feel that. Since what happened, I had text message from the Jewish friends. Are you okay? Are your wife's family okay? And I was texting them, look, are you okay? And I think it is very important to agree on the language, because the word anti-Semite has been used and abused, and most.
By the way, I want to make this clear, because a lot of the times, I'm going to make this I want to clarify this as much as possible. Every single time somebody says anti-Semitism, I need to point out the fact that Arabs are also Semites. Arabs are also Semitic people. So Arabic, Hebrew, and a bunch of other languages fall into the category of Semitic languages, and all the ethnic groups who speak these languages and are of this culture, for example, Arabs, Hebrews, the Jewish people, and I think the Iranians as well. So they all fall under the category of Semitic people. So being discriminatory to an Arab or a Palestinian would also technically, literally count as anti-Semitism as well. So if you're being discriminatory to a Muslim who is an Arab from the Middle East, that should also count as anti-Semitism.
Most of the time, not on.
That's kind of like a word that's actually not clearly defined, in my opinion.
Used and abused, and most of the time not for the good interest of the Jewish people. Because the first 2 days of the coverage, I watched the news, and there was a lot of protests that was led by Jewish Voice for Peace.
Oh,
and
awesome.
By people who opposed the Israeli attack on the civilians.
There are actually lots of Jewish organizations that I'm aware of. There's Jewish Voice for Peace. There's also Scottish Jews against Zionism, and then there's another one called Nature Carta, I believe. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Then there's a renowned rabbi whose name is Yisrael David Weiss, who is also really, really awesome, who has been a staunch supporter of the Palestinian cause. These are Jewish people, right? So so that further proves that being anti-Zionist has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, because literally Jewish people are standing up for the Palestinians, trying to stop the oppression and the apartheid and the genocide happening in Gaza.
And I remember quite well, many of the Republican representatives in Congress came out and they were calling these the global intifada, the global jihad. I love it when they say jihad. They sound like a horse. Jihad. It's very good. Or they say like, these are, and I quote, Iranian-backed jihadists. And I said, wait a minute, but most of those people are Jewish. Those people who took over the Capitol, the same people who took over Central Station in New York, which is known as the biggest civil disobedience event in America in the last 2 decades, they were all Jewish.
Wow.
And then I find Nikki Haley saying anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism.
No, it doesn't.
And then I remember it's like, oh, Jewish people in America are saddled by the fact that they are not citizens of America or citizens of the world, but they are citizens of Israel, and they have to back Israel in whatever they do. And these are not my words; these are the words of Jon Stewart. He went down and he said it's very, very important to divide these two. And what is very, very interesting.
Would you compare that on that specific point to the way that people try and say all Palestinians are responsible and accountable for what Hamas do?
Yes, yeah.
In other words, I think you can be very critical of Israeli government and their policies,
yes,
and Benjamin Netanyahu and the politicians. That doesn't mean that you have to take that criticism to innocent Israelis who may have exactly the same criticism themselves.
And this is why it is very important to have these kind of discussions, because the funniest, the saddest thing that I saw is the people that were in so much support of Israel are anti-Semite themselves. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, she said like, oh, I send my aides, and they took pictures of the protesters. Basically, she's surveilling protesters. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is very known for a very famous post in 2018 where she blamed the California fires on a Jewish space laser gun. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? I was just like, oh, they were there because Jewish investors, Rothschild and Feinstein, anything that ends with Stein, because that's of course sounds Jewish, they put a satellite and shooting laser beams to. And not just her. You have Steve Skoulas, thank you so much. He is now the Speaker of the House, and he has been invited before for an organization that was funded by David Duke, the founder of the KKK. You have Kevin McCarthy, who is the former minority speaker, leader of the Republican Party in the House, and he accused Jewish billionaires of rigging the midterm. So how come those people are accusing us of anti-Semites? So here's the thing. So let's go to the equation that Nikki Haley put on Twitter. Anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. No, it is true. People who hate Jews, they're also anti-Zionists. It is true. And you could be someone who hates Zionists, who don't like Zionism, and you are Semite. You could even be Jewish. And guess what? You could be a Zionist, like those people, supporting Israel, and at the same time you hate the Jews, because the chant "Jews will not replace us," these echoed in Charlottesville. It did not echo in Gaza. I mean, in Gaza they say worse stuff in between the bombing on their downtime. And these are the same people who are seen with Nick Fuentes, with Stephen Bannon. And you know what's most interesting?
Trump had him for dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
And all of those people are buddies with Benjamin Netanyahu. So how does this work? How does this work? And you know the people who speak against this, like Jon Stewart, like Bernie Sanders, like Naomi Klein, what do they call these people? What do they call them? Self-hating Jews. And you know what else now they call them? They call them capos. Capos. You know what's capos? Capos?
I hate that term.
Basically, these were the Jewish inmate in Auschwitz that were forced by the Nazis to stand as guards on their own inmates.
Shit.
See how degrading this is. And this is the way to shut down conversation. Anti-Semite, Islamophobe, you hate America, you hate the military, you hate Egypt, war on Christmas. This is how you shut an environment that does not allow disagreement is not an environment made for growth. It's an environment made for control.
Let me ask you this. Say, take the student protests in
Yes,
America, at university. I have no problem instinctively with students protesting. It's actually part of the DNA of being a student, right? But I do have a problem with two things. One, the protests that happened almost immediately after October the 7th, within hours, which were clearly, deeply, deliberately inflammatory and hurtful to Jewish people. Secondly, I have a real problem with the students who were beaming direct pro-Hamas slogans onto buildings on campuses in America. You know, I'm all for free speech, and I really am. The whole show is predicated on that. But not to the point where you see Jewish students barricaded into libraries because a mob is descending on them. There is a distinction to me between people who are obviously overtly, I mean, there was a professor at Cornell University who was literally seen in public shouting how exhilarated he felt by the attacks of October the 7th. He still hasn't been fired, that guy. I think that crosses a line. Do you?
Yeah, I do not like this way. I mean, I can understand why, but I don't condone it. I would never, because you have to understand these people, again, I'm not supporting them. I just want to make sure about two things. The reason that I started with anti-Semitism, because I wanted to make sure to clear any confusion that when I speak about Israel, I'm speaking about Israel.
Yes.
When I speak about Jewish people, I'm speaking about Jewish people.
Yes.
When I speak about Zionists, I'm speaking about Zionists. It would very, because
no, I think it was very powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I have to be careful.
That's the first thing you did, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I tell you why does that happen, it doesn't mean that I condone it. There's a difference between explanation and justification. Those people who are exhilarated, the way that they, this is the same reason why people were so happy about the interview. What do they see? They see Israel as a criminal state who is killing their people, and at the same time they are supported by the international community and the American. They have no guns, they have no superpower backing them. All they have is just feeling of happiness, like, yes, our enemies that we cannot touch them has been hurt. All they can think about, that these are their enemies that have been hurt, right? I'm not condoning this, but again, like when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, you know, against Western targets, of course I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been, from a very young age, what have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of their brothers in Israel, in Palestine, in the Arab world are not being heard. People in Iraq, you know, like when America and Britain invaded Iraq, right? What the Arabs saw? It's like two superpowers are coming in on just regular people. So whenever there was like a bomb or like an attack on American troops, people would celebrate. Yeah, they're our enemies. Emotions are very inflammatory, and it is not right. But those people had nothing else. All they say is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just gonna scratch your eyes. I'm gonna scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No. But it is understandable. Again, it's not the right thing. But no, it's not like understandable. It's like, oh, no. But again, it is an explanation. Now, hate. And again, this is another way why this has been magnified in the media so much. What does the Western audience see? They see people rejoicing for the death of innocent civilians in Israel.
It's actually brilliant how he deconstructed this situation, because how he explained the celebration. Like, I also saw like celebratory posts going around when the attack actually happened. So like in the beginning, a lot of us don't actually grasp what's actually happening. What's actually happening? Like, we just think that, okay, maybe some Palestinians got out, right, from Gaza. And maybe they're just fighting military, right? The Hamas militants are fighting the IDF forces or something like that. So we celebrate. But then, so a lot of people celebrated. you know. But then when we actually see some of the footage, like I've seen some of the footage happening in the concerts and some of the people being gunned down and a lot of people dying, and I felt terrible. And on the spot, I was like, yes, I support the Palestinian cause, but at the same time, I cannot support the killing of innocent civilians. So I was immediately against it from the start. The moment I actually heard the news and saw what happened, I was against it. But that does not mean that gives Israel the license to kill 9,000 people. As we're recording it, the death toll crosses 9,000.
Is what have the Arabs seen for years on the Arab world. For example, if you look up Sidrot cinema, this is in 2014 when Israel was bombing Gaza as usual, and the Israelis in the Sidrot, the kibbutz or the settlement, they went on a hill and they had popcorn and they had drinks and they were like watching the show and they were cheering with every rocket coming down. This is what we see. Western people didn't see that.
Well, somebody found a tweet actually of mine from 20.
I've actually seen a lot of disgusting racism from a lot of these Israelis, and there's actually a really cool video. I feel like the world needs to open their eyes and see what's happening as it's happening to the Palestinian people.
In which I said, at what point does what Israel is currently doing to the Palestinian people become terrorism? And because I've always said, I've spoken about this a lot over the years, and I've always tried to be extremely fair-minded, albeit nobody really wants you to be fair-minded. They want you to take a side. But that was clear that my thinking back then was that they were absolutely overstepping.
Absolutely,
the mark.
absolutely. But again, to the point of rejoicing.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but like if you, for example, Google the wedding of hate. This is like a Jewish wedding in Israel where they were celebrating the arsons and the burning of Palestinians.
But to be clear, I've seen lots of videos.
No, but like, I'm not talking to you, Piers.
No, I know.
I'm talking to the Western audience because I want to see I want to say this is what they see. I mean, for example, there is a very famous video for Samer Abu Za'anin, who is like a young kid that he was shot point blank by an Israeli soldier, and he was not allowed to have any medical attention. And as his dead body was being put into the ambulance, the Jewish settlers were cheering. So for an Arab audience, this is what we see every day. So when they see, oh, we heard them back, we heard their people like they heard back, it is not right. But this is what hate does. It escalates. It feeds each other. Radicalism feeds it. It is terrible, and it is just like a vicious circle. So I would like to do something that is very interesting to me. When I invited Jon Stewart to my show, as much of like a reception that if you see on the YouTube, people just like we had to cut the 5-minute standing ovation for broadcast. People were on their feet for 5 minutes. They could not believe it. I remember Jon Stewart telling me I could never imagine that a Jewish guy from New Jersey would have that kind of reception in Cairo. And yet, on the internet, people who would have, what? You brought a Jew on your show? Why you are with a Jew? Yes, hate. Because
all right.
See each other. People in the Middle East and people in the West. That we do not put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I want to do something very interesting. I want to give, I like telling stories. And I'm going to tell you a very nice story. This is the story, surprise, surprise, of the suffering and the plight of the Jewish people. And I want to say that because it is very interesting when you see the trauma and the suffering that the people on the other side went through, you might understand why they're coming. So this is, see this? This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews in Europe. They've been like, I have never seen a minority being kicked around this much, right? And of course, this comes back to the whole idea about the original sin, that you have betrayed Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus is on your hands. And then comes the 11th century. At that time, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. They were just peasants. Even some of the professions were not even allowed to participate in. But they were allowed to do one thing, usury. money lending, because it was prohibited by the Catholic Church to engage into that. So what happens when you work in money? You get richer, right? And those Jews lived in ghettos. Now, ghettos were not just like isolated neighborhoods in cities. Sometimes ghettos were outside the city. This is like how isolated they were. This was the image, greedy Jew, the greedy Jew. This was created because of their conditions. And when Pope Urban II called for the first crusade to go and save the birthright.
It's actually kind of disappointing that even now a lot of people don't really understand that Muslims, we all believe in Jesus. So like saying, oh, the unbelieving Muslims, like Muslims believe in Jesus, and we believe in Jesus as the Messiah, unlike the Jews who don't think Jesus was anything, whereas we recognize him as the Messiah. We believe in the second coming. We wait for his second coming. He's gonna come and defeat the Antichrist, and we believe in all that stuff. So what do you mean unbelieving Jews? Because obviously a lot of Christians then, and as well as currently still today, don't know that we believe in Jesus.
You know how many people they killed? 2,000 Jews. Because it's like, wait, the non-believers are all over there. Why? So they went to it's called the Crusades of the Rhineland. So they went to the Jewish community because, hey, we own the money, so let's kill them better than paying them. And then came the plague. And then all of the things like, oh, they're killing babies, who would do that to a baby, you know? And they accused them of poisoning the well. This was the kind of oppression that the Jewish people went through. Fast forward 19th century, there was like the Eastern Jew in Ukraine and Russia, and there was the Western Jews in Europe. Those people in the Eastern Jews had to immigrate because there were pogroms and they were like, kicked out. And at a certain point, the people in the West, especially in England, it's like, there are too many Jews. We need a solution. A solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's like we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even in the A list. Palestine was in the B list. Because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews, 1903. And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said, like, it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options: Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar. And eventually they said, all right, let's do Palestine. So they went to Palestine in 1914. There was 700,000 people living in Palestine, 3% were Jewish. 1917, Balfour Declaration. Arthur Balfour, he called the Jewish people in England that they are alien and hostile race. And the thing is, the only Jewish member of the parliament, of the English parliament, Lord Montague, he objects, like, these are British citizens, we should not kick them out. So they pushed them, but it was not going fast enough. Came the Nazis. And then it was not about the solution anymore. It was the Endlösung, the final solution by Hitler, because he needed an answer for the Jewish question, the Judefrage. And then, as you see, the Holocaust happened, the most orchestrated, industrialized, horrible genocide in our modern time. 6 million Jews.
Absolutely terrible.
So it accelerated, and they went. First of all, they left East Europe, and they went to West Europe, and went to America, and they were turned down, and they were pushed towards Palestine. So by 1948, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of like a land without a people, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of like a land without a people to a people without a land, it was a marketing thing. They were already Palestinians. So suddenly, from our perspective, the Jewish problem is not a Jewish problem, is not a Middle Eastern problem, is not an Arab problem, it is a European problem. It was pushed on us together with the guilt, because now we are the anti-Semite. Now we are the Jewish hater. And not just that.
So they transferred it. They transferred the anti-Semitism to the Arabs. Arabs themselves are Semitic people. I've pointed this out earlier, and I'll keep pointing it out again and again and again. You cannot call an Arab an anti-Semite, because an Arab, by definition, is also a Semitic race.
Clan. So people look at this like, why are we even, we had a lot of refugees coming in. And during that, there was a lot of, as you know, Zionist militia. The Aragon, the Haganah, all of these people were killing Palestinians. The famous massacre of Deir Yassin. You're talking about the atrocities of October 7th, is horrible. But in the Arab mind, there is Deir Yassin, where there is an incredible movie called Tantoura, Tantoura, where the Israeli members of Tantoura, where the Israeli members of those militias, they talk about the atrocities that they did, including opening up the pregnant women bellies and having bets if the boy inside is a boy or a girl. It is one of the most horrific, and they talk about it, some talk about with regret and some talk about with pleasure. We did that, right? So you have even King David. I think your Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, was there. And if I was British, I would question this. Because as you know, King David was bombed by the Aragon militias. 91 British soldiers died.
Right.
I don't know, if I was British, how come my Prime Minister would have the nerve to stay in that hotel? I mean, you know, the ghost of the 91 British soldiers, that must be haunting for them, you see? So when you see all of that, and you see that suddenly, overnight, 1948, there were 1.5 million Palestinians, half of them, 3/4 of them were overnight pushed into refugees.
Yeah.
And this is why it's called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So now we have all of this building up into the minds. And suddenly this was like a conflict, a hate, a problem that we didn't have to do anything with.